please let that go. Take a few cleansing breaths. Thank you, dear Sangha, for coming here tonight, for allowing me to lead you in meditation. Thank you so much for the invitation to do that and also to give a short talk. And it's interesting because we were at Salinas Valley Prison yesterday, and then Bruce had a prompt, and the prompt was, "Why are you here? Why are you here in this class, in this chapel now?" And, hearing what people had to say was really fascinating. And, then we were talking about what led us to have Sangha. And Nancy, Bruce, and I were there because Jill is still recovering, but very well recovering from her surgery. And we were discussing why we had come and what had drawn us. And I realized that I just had this flash when we were meditating, talking about the forgiveness of others. I was thinking about, I grew up, I mean, I'm Jewish. My family's not really that religious, but we're definitely not Christian. And I grew up in a very Christian fundamentalist. I grew up in the Bible Belt, the Deep South. And I was thinking about, I never could really understand how people on one hand could go, God is loving, God is kind, God is good. And then at the same time, apparently God is so willing to cast people into hell for all eternity, even if they have never, no matter how bad you might have been, it's certainly not going to be for all of eternity, right? Um, and then I'm sorry, I had a call coming in, but just thinking that whole idea. And I remember one time we had these babysitters that went to a Bible college, and they asked my parents if they could take us to a revival. And my parents, said it would be okay if it was okay with us. So my brothers and I went. I was about, gosh, how old was I? I guess I was like 12 or 13. So my brothers were like 9 and 10. And so we went there, and it's all those. I don't know if y'all have ever been to one, but it's very much, that whole fire and brimstone and very emotional. And people are coming up, they come up to the front of the tent and they talk about how they were sinners and now they're saved. And it could be somebody who's, my age now, that is a grandparent's age, or it could be, a teenager coming up and they're welcomed. But I remember I was just horrified at, all these stories, because that's when I first started, like, you're going to go to hell forever, not just, even if you're a bad person and you did committed awful, awful actions, but simply because you didn't believe in Jesus Christ. I mean, you could be a fantastic, wonderful, saintly person and never have done anything wrong in your life somehow, but you were still going to go to hell for all eternity if you didn't accept Jesus. So it just occurred to me, the flash I had was that I think our prison system is like that. I mean, people have done something, or they might have even done several things and done really terrible things. However, really, do they have to be in prison for decades because of that? It just seems, I also don't understand that. And I think that's maybe partly what drew me towards doing this Sangha work. I mean, the upfront reason that I did it was because Natasha asked me, she came to our Sangha and she asked for volunteers. And I had previously, when I lived in Birmingham, Alabama, I had talked with some people. I tried to teach yoga in the jails, but that had never really come to fruition. So I was kind of leaning towards that. And when Natasha asked the Sangha, I said that I was interested. But I think that part of it now was that I was drawn to it because it just seems so horribly unfair. And yeah, just to kind of write people off. And I was thinking about people I knew who have been in prison, and I know quite a number. I'm sure everybody does. But I was thinking, my former sister-in-law was in, I don't think she was ever in prison, but she was in jail. And sometimes I would go and take things to her, but I never really had like a long visit with her. And then I had a neighbor who's same thing. And then I had, um, I remember he was the first person that I went to visit where you actually have to talk on the telephone, through the I don't guess it's glass, but whatever it is, the transparent sure, like very strong protection with the wire mesh in it. And I remember just thinking how bizarre that was. It was like he was in another world. And then I had another friend who was in prison. Gosh, I'm not sure how long he was in. I mean, it wasn't at that time, it seemed really long, but unfortunately, compared to some of the people that we know and work with, and some of y'all who are here, it was about 5 years, I believe. Um, and anyway, I remember he would write us letters, but he was he didn't want anybody to visit him. He just, I mean, he didn't. He just, I don't know. He just said he didn't want to make anybody else come through and go to prison, and experience prison even as a visitor. He just wanted to, yeah, he just preferred to write letters to people. And so that was how he communicated. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure he called his family. I don't recall him ever giving us a phone call. Um, and heaven knows how much they were charging for phone calls. Um, so that was, yeah, kind of my touches. And then one time I myself was arrested. I was at a demonstration and got arrested and held in jail overnight. And they weren't even calling it the jail. It was called the pretrial detention center. So it was simply a place you went if we weren't, it was during a protest. And I guess because we were out of town, they wouldn't release us on our own recognizance because, we would have been quite a flight risk for sure. Um, but all those things, of course, didn't really prepare me for going into the prisons. Um, I went to, or I should say, the jail first, because when I worked at the library, I worked in the jail. And I had heard Angela Davis. I was very lucky. I'm sure that was another reason that I wanted to, that I was drawn to Natasha's invitation, because I'd heard Angela Davis and then her sister. I'm so sorry, I'm forgetting her name this moment, but she has a sister who's also very involved with restorative justice and has worked in the prisons quite a bit. And then they have a brother who is in prison himself. And then what's fascinating about the Davis family is that they were quite a prominent Black family in Birmingham. And then, but Mrs. Davis, their mother, Angela and her siblings' mother, was literally a card carrying communist. So this was a family that was quite radical. And um, Angela and her sister did quite a bit of study. And what an academic intellect and firebrand she is. Just um, Angela Davis did so much study on the whole carceral system and the prison industrial complex. And one thing, but of all the things she said, because she really described the whole deal about going from the convict leasing that began. I'm not quite sure when it began, but I know it was sometime after this, not too long after the Civil War. Up until now, it's still being done, or having prisoners make all these different kinds of furniture for the government and just basically be like extremely low paid, uh, not shackled, but bound laborers, and how that's still considered legal due to our Constitution. And then but the one thing she said that struck me the most, and I think about a lot, is she's like, anybody could go to prison, because she was speaking to a pretty big audience. There must have been hundreds of people there. She was speaking at one of the law schools in Birmingham. And she said, everybody here has committed some kind of crime. You just haven't been caught and held accountable for it by the legal system. And that really, truly stuck with me a whole lot. And then when I started going into the prison, I was just struck by people's acceptance, like all these things we just read about, the forgiveness, people forgiving life. I mean, we all know people who really are being held completely unjustly. There's some people who didn't commit the crime that they were imprisoned for. Um, there's so many, and then of course we all know about people who commit really, really terrible, atrocious crimes and can hardly, don't even get charged. So seeing people, I mean, when I first started going to the jails, actually, as working for the library, and then when I started going to the prison as a volunteer, it took me quite a while to get over that. I would just be so upset, and I would feel the total weight of how unfairness it was. And then after a while, and I believe it's through the example of the men, um, not that they're resigned to their fate, but that they they have a forgiveness about it, you know? And to me, that's what that whole thing is about: forgiving others, forgiving life for the tragic circumstances, the causes and conditions. And even people who, did commit many, many crimes and will admit, and say that and say, I mean, even I don't really think that I don't think most people who are in prison should be in prison. I certainly don't believe in the really long sentences. And I'm sure that most of the people that we see as part of our sangha inside also don't feel that way, but yet they have the grace, they have the determination, have done the practice to actually be able to forgive life itself for that, to be able to forgive themselves for bad choices they made, how they hurt themselves and hurt others. How now they're subject to what I believe is cruel and inhuman punishment, um, and how they're able to forgive other people. Like probably a number of them had people give false testimony against them, or a number of people, um, maybe their family won't come visit them, or their wife wanted a divorce, or their kids are mad, and that all the or whatever, their community, they're facing the fact that they have a lot to forgive other people for as well as themselves, and have substantially been able to do it. Um, so that's one of the biggest lessons. I mean, I've learned so many, many, many things from people, um, that are incarcerated. And I've learned many things listening to academics and activists like Dr. Davis and other people. And of course, every one of you here. And the lesson that strikes me right now, though, is the lesson about forgiveness and how that's such a base. We talk a lot about how gratitude is a huge base and helps us in the practice. And to my mind, forgiveness is too. And I'm very thankful for the people I've met inside who are helping me, helping show me the way to forgiveness. So thank you all so much for listening. Really appreciate it. Dora, bowing out.